Hello, everyone. Meteorologist Ted Keller, and I would say that as we sit here approaching the middle of August, probably the most exciting weather would be the formation today of Tropical Storm Erin, and that's the rough outline of where that's headed. And I'll show you the arrival times here in just a second. We also have some stuff way out over the central Atlantic, which isn't going to affect the U.S., and a 30% chance or less tropical storm formation in the Gulf. It's been a pretty repeated occurrence here so far early in the tropical season, but that's a very low probability, and this is all over the next 7 days. But let's take a closer look at Tropical Storm Erin, which formed today. It's going to be going almost due west. And then toward the end here of this forecast cycle, it does curve a little bit more to the west-northwest, moving west-northwest. And will this continue? Will this continue to do this? It might. There are indications that it's going to go and kind of thread the needle, let's say, between Bermuda and the U.S., but it's still way too far out to be able to tell. When does it become a hurricane? Well, here's 2 p.m. Wednesday, still a tropical storm. And then by Thursday or by Wednesday evening, it's forecast to become a hurricane. So that is the story on that. Now, again, way too early to know whether this is actually going to curve back out. I'll show you some model information here in a minute. But this still could impact the U.S. It's many days out. And of course, everything in the tropics moves slower. So it just takes days and days and days. So it doesn't even get to moving north of the Leeward Islands until this weekend. So, 5-6 days away. Here's Tropical Storm Erin in the infrared loop. So this basically is indicating cold cloud tops. So you see this white here toward the end. It means we've had an intensification of thunderstorms in the last couple of hours there. So it continues to strengthen. And there is some circulation evident on that. It's not real great, but you can see it. This is the Euro model of tropical storm probability. And when is this valid for? Well, it's the 20th. And so that would be, I don't think that date is wrong. I think that the 20th is today's the 11th. So, it would be Wednesday of next week. So it's forecast to be here by the Hurricane Center on Saturday. And then the probability of it being around here somewhere by Wednesday is showing about 50 to 60%. So, and you can tell by this, the way this is shaped, that it's kind of doing something like that. But again, I've seen these models dance around this and change their mind, especially when you're talking about something almost a week away. So, Southeast U.S., no need to panic or anything. But of course, this is the time of year where you should be watching the open Atlantic for tropical development. Sea surface temperatures are sort of neutral where the storm is now and for the next couple of days, and a little bit above normal on sea surface temperatures there by that Saturday forecast, right around there. So again, unless I saw patches of this hanging around really below normal sea surface temperatures, all this is considered to be within the temperature range of the ocean temperature that is just fine for tropical storm and hurricane development. So now we've crossed Erin off the list. Ferdinand would be next. Don't see anything like that in the foreseeable future, but now that's where we are. And since I last talked about this, the Hurricane Center did lower the confidence on an above normal season by just a little bit. It was 60, and now it's back down to 50%. And again, very little change. Colorado State also issues a similar forecast, and their range for named storms, hurricane, and major hurricanes all fall within the middle of the ranges I showed you here. So they're pretty much in agreement as well. I'll take a look here at the month of August. And so this is the number of named storms per 100 years. And the red is the greatest on the scale here, greater than 70. So right in that area where Erin is going to track, actually is forecast to go a little bit more north of that, is about where we should be looking. And also some tropical storms can be found there. Now, we did have the last storm, Dexter, form and move through this area. So this is all keeping in climatology. And yeah, we watch the Gulf this time of year, but it's not the primary area of curiosity and keeping a watchful eye on storms. And if you're wondering on Atlantic activity where this thing peaks, it's usually right around September 10th is where you see a peak in hurricane and tropical storm development. Temperatures are hot. I would say seasonably hot, a little bit above normal. I live in Springfield. We're at 94. That's about 3 or 4 degrees above what the so-called normal is for this time of year. St. Louis 91. Gets a little hotter. Southern Arkansas 97. Shreveport 96. Dallas Fort Worth area about 95, maybe 98 degrees. You can see there's some thunderstorms at play there. Very obvious by the way they cool the atmosphere down. We'll shift west a little bit and take a look. Areas around Phoenix are getting close to 110, if not above that, in southern parts of Arizona, and also the interior southern valleys of California, pretty hot. Fresno at 102 degrees. And then we go more north. Marine air, very evident. Look at the coastal temperatures here in the 60s and maybe a 70, whereas just a few miles west, it's 100 degrees. And very commonly in the interior and the western part of Washington and Oregon, it does get this hot, actually. 100s are not that uncommon. Heat advisories are in effect kind of in a scattered sort of fashion throughout much of the West, and some of the, cities might be under excessive heat warnings. Honestly, I didn't check, but that's very common this time of year. And one area I didn't really talk about temperature-wise was Maine. They have some heat advisories there, as well as upstate Vermont and parts of upstate New York as well. We'll take a look at high temperatures here on Tuesday. Again, how to read this is to look at this here. So the colors are not temperatures. The colors are whether you're above or below normal. So on Tuesday, you can see the Central Plains are being affected by a rain system I'll show you here in a minute. So temperatures are going to be cool. So the greens are below normal. Pretty hot, though, in Washington and parts of Oregon with that red color. So, 12 degrees above normal in some of those areas with 100-degree temperatures. And the reason for the advisories in Maine for tomorrow, pretty clear with temperatures in the mid-90s that far to the north and northeast. Skipping ahead to Thursday, there's sort of a moderation across the country, nothing too hot or too cold, except maybe parts of South Dakota and Nebraska showing a pretty anomalous heat there, but in a pretty small patch. And then skipping ahead to Saturday, again, kind of above normal, beginning in Michigan, going on over into Pennsylvania and New York, and maybe a little bit of the Kansas and Nebraska area. Much of the Northwest, though, cools down significantly with much cooler temperatures. So we went from having 12 degrees above the normal high temperatures to about the same or maybe even colder in parts of Washington by this coming weekend. As far as where heat is headed, this is the hazardous heat outlook. This is actually the 3 to 7 day forecast. So that would be Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So the 16th through the 18th, this hazardous heat actually starts out here and then backs up more into Louisiana. Let's take a look at the whole country, and you can see there's really two moisture flow areas. There's this very, very weak frontal system here causing some thunderstorms that we'll zoom in on in a minute, and also just kind of a flow off the Gulf into the Florida Panhandle. Some thunderstorms also in the Carolinas. That about defines it really in terms of interesting weather. There is a trough of low pressure here helping to support a front that's through here, and out ahead of that, the showers and thunderstorms are forming. We've had this heat dome form over the west here with high pressure over California. Explains some of these higher temperatures out west, including Washington. But having this trough in the north is actually, again, fairly significant for August. And we don't typically get the jet stream dipping this far south, but it certainly is doing so. We'll take a look at the Central Plains here, and you can see the thunderstorm blow up here, very, very, very evident. The white tops there, a little bit of a swirl in the clouds there, probably left over thunderstorm activity. And as I'll show you in a minute, there's a slight tornado probability in that area, but very slight. Take a look at the radar. And did I set this to loop? No, I didn't. So I'll just press it. There we go. And so you can see thunderstorms. These red are flash flood warnings. And there's been a couple of severe thunderstorm warnings in western Missouri there, mostly from wind gusts. And you can see there's more activity down the line here, some severe thunderstorm warnings in and around the Oklahoma City area. But generally speaking, I'll show you severe weather in a minute, but there's no watches in effect right now. And the only marginal risks for severe weather are here in the short term. But now on the heavy rain front, again, not as bad as it was throughout a lot of the summer in select locations, but there is currently a flood watch in effect for the central part of Oklahoma, basically in a small part of North Texas. And if we take a look at where the heavy rain hazards are, there's a slight risk in that exact same area. But also some of these storms I showed you out over the Carolinas could produce some heavy downpours. And you saw that flow of moisture into the panhandle of Florida. Let's take a look at some quantitative precipitation forecasts. So this is for the next 5 days. So this kind of sums up the two rainy areas are going to be Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Michigan, and also the southeast, including all these areas here, and maybe a little bit of Oklahoma as well. So that's not any particular day. That's a 5-day running total. Also a little little heavy rain around Seattle and in western Washington. That signals that cool down I showed you, going from 100s to 70s and 60s. Here's the total precipitation for the next 3 days in the southeast. You see some isolated 1 to 2 inch totals in the panhandle, maybe around the Atlanta area. Not as bad. Earlier on through much of the summer, we had a real problem with flooding. It would just pop up in various places. This is actually calming down a little bit. And I didn't have a map of the same type, but I could show you this. This is actually not this is an accumulation over 2 days. This is the 4 and 5 day precipitation outlook. So the 14th through the 16th, showing that swath of heavier rain through Wisconsin. Again, heavier rain defined by anywhere from 1 to maybe 2 inches. There's room to change that, of course. But again, point taken that a lot of the ridiculous rain totals of much of the summer have kind of taken a back seat here a little bit, and that's certainly good news. Severe storms, marginal risk for severe storms, including the Kansas City area along I-70 and into northern parts of Missouri, and again along I-44 down into the heart of Oklahoma, back to Amarillo and Lubbock, and circling back into almost getting to Santa Fe and Albuquerque. And I showed you the radar. There were a couple of warnings in effect for that line there and for some of this activity in western Missouri. There's a slight tornado risk, a 2% chance right around between Kansas City and St. Joe, and also up around Minnesota, way up in western Minnesota. And that's about it. If I were to take this outlook for Tuesday and Wednesday, all marginal risks, no more slight risk. But they did pull the trigger on Thursday, day 4, for some severe weather activity from Bismarck over to Fargo. This was a very active area for tornadoes in June. Now they're back under the gun again. And remember the cold air that was moving into the northwest? Well, the same system is what's going to drive this severe weather threat on Thursday. If we look at next week, this is NIU's forecast for severe weather. Last thing we'll look at today, it kind of indicates the Corn Belt up to Montana and North Dakota for the 18th through the 24th. Not a real high probability. Again, the way this works is it's the probability of a supercell forming cumulatively, so for a 7-day period. And supercells are just defined as storms that can produce severe weather. So a 59 mile per hour wind gust or higher, 1 inch hail or larger, or a tornado would all fall under that category. Thanks for watching this edition of Weather to Watch. It comes out every other day, or as the weather necessitates. Please remember to share this with your friends, subscribe to the channel, or at the very least, like what you just watched. Thanks.